Airport, a novel by Arthur Hailey. Copyright 1968 by Arthur Hailey Limited. Read by Jahangir Abdullaev. From traffic control to customs hall, from the airport manager's office to layover apartments in Stewardesses Row, the rooms are filled with men and women whose private pressures and passions match the fury of the blizzards and sweeps across the runway outside. For 7 hours of suspense and blocked runway suicide pickets and aerial stowaway, pregnancy smuggling, mass demonstrations, and psychotic with his homemade bomb built to a nail-biting climax. Oh, I have slept the surly bonds of earth and danced the skies on laughter-silvered wings. From High Flight by John Gillespie McGee, Jr., 1922 to 1941. Sometimes Flight Lieutenant, Royal Canadian Air Force. Part 1. 6:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. Chapter 1. At 6:30 on a Friday evening in January, Lincoln International Airport, Illinois, was functioning, though with difficulty. The airport was reeling, as was the entire Midwestern United States, from the meanest, roughest winter storm in half a dozen years. The storm had lasted 3 days. Now, like puzzles on a battered, weakened body, troubled spots were erupting steadily. A United Airlines food truck loaded with 200 dinners was lost and presumably snowbound somewhere on the airport perimeter. A search for the truck, in driving snow and darkness, had so far failed to locate either the missing vehicle or its driver. United's Flight 111, a non-stop DC-8 for Los Angeles, which the food truck was to service, was already several hours behind schedule. The food snafu would make it later still. Similar delays, for varying reasons, were affecting at least 100 flights of 20 other airlines using Lincoln International. Out on the airfield, runway 30 was out of use, blocked by an Aero-Mexican jet, a Boeing 707, its wheels deeply mired in waterlogged ground beneath snow, near the runway's edge. 2 hours of intensive effort had failed to get the big jet moved. Now, Aero-Mexican, having exhausted its own local resources, had appealed to TWA for help. Transworld Airways. Air traffic control, hampered by the loss of runway 30, had instituted flow control procedures limiting the volume of incoming traffic from adjoining air route centers at Minneapolis, Cleveland, Kansas City, Indianapolis, and Denver. Despite these, 20 incoming flights were stacked up overhead and orbiting, some nearing low fuel limits. On the ground, twice that number were ready for takeoff. But until the backlog of flights in the air could be reduced, ATC had ordered further delays of outbound traffic. And while terminal gates, taxiways, and ground holding areas were increasingly crammed with waiting aircraft, many with engines running, air freight warehouses of all airlines were stacked to their palletized limits with shipments, their usual high-speed transit impeded by the storm. Freight supervisors were nervously watching perishables, hothouse flowers from Wyoming for New England, a ton of Pennsylvania cheese for Anchorage, Alaska, frozen peas for Iceland, live lobsters transshipped from the east for a polar route flight, destination Europe. The lobsters were for tomorrow's menus in Edinburgh and Paris, where they would be built as fresh local seafood. An American tourist would order them unknowingly. Storm or not, Congress decrees that air freight perishables must arrive at destination fresh and swiftly. Causing special anxiety in American Airlines flight was a shipment of several thousand turkey pods, hatched in incubators only hours earlier. The precise shipping schedule, like a complex order of battle, was set up weeks ago before the turkey eggs were laid. It called for delivery of the live birds on the west coast within 48 hours of birth, the limit of the tiny creature's existence without their first food or water. Normally, the arrangement provided a near 100% survival. Significant also, if the poults were fed on food, they would stink, and so would the airplane conveying them for days afterward. Already the poult's schedule was out of joint by several hours, but an airplane had been diverted from passenger to freight service, and tonight the fledgling turkeys would have priority over everything else traveling, human VIPs included. In the main passenger terminal, chaos predominated. Terminal waiting areas were jammed with thousands of passengers from delayed or cancelled flights. Baggage, in piles, was everywhere. The vast main concourse had the combined appearance of a football scrimmage in Christmas Eve at Macy's. High on the terminal roof, the airport's immodious slogan, Lincoln International Aviation Crossroads on the World, was entirely obscured by drifting snow. The wonder was, Mel Bakerfeld reflected, that anything was continuing to operate at all. Mel, airport general manager, lean, rangy, and a powerhouse of disciplined energy, was standing by the snow control desk high in the control tower. He peered out into the darkness. Normally, from this glass-walled room, the entire airport complex, runways, taxi strips, terminals, traffic of the ground and air, was visibly like neatly aligned building blocks and models. Even at night, their shapes and movements well defined by lights. Only one loftier view existed, that of air traffic control, which occupied the 2 floors above. But tonight only a faint blur of a few nearer lights penetrated the almost opaque curtain of wind-driven snow. Mel suspected this would be a winter to be discussed at meteorologist conventions for years to come. The present storm had been born 5 years ago in the lee of the Colorado mountains. At birth, it was a tiny low-pressure area, not bigger than a foothills homestead, and most forecasters on their route weather charts had either failed to notice or ignored it, as if in their resentment the low-pressure system thereupon inflated like a giant malignancy and still growing swung first southeast, then north. It crossed Kansas and Oklahoma, then paused at Arkansas, gathering assorted nastiness. Next day, fat and monstrous, it rumbled up the Mississippi Valley. Finally, over Illinois, the storm unloaded, almost paralyzing the state with blizzard winds, freezing temperatures, and 10-inch snowfall in 24 hours. At the airport, the 10-inch snow had been preceded by a continuous, if somewhat lighter, fall. Now it was being followed by more snow, whipped by vicious winds, which piled new drifts, at the same time that plows were cleaning the old. Maintenance snow crews were nearing exhaustion. Within the past few hours, several men had been ordered home, over-fatigued despite their intermittent use of sleeping quarters provided at the airport for just this kind of emergency. At the snow control desk near Mel, Danny Farrow, at other times an assistant airport manager, now snow shift supervisor, was calling maintenance snow center by radiophone. "We're losing the parking lots. I need 6 more payloaders and a banjo team at Y74. Danny was seated at the snow desk, which was not really a desk at all, but a wide 3-position console. Confronting Danny and his 2 assistants, one on either side, was a battery of telephones, teleautographs, and radios. Surrounding them were maps, charts, and bulletin boards recording the state and location of every piece of motorized snow fighting equipment, as well as men and supervisors. There was a separate board for banjo teams, rowing crews with individual snow shovels.